Hey there, welcome back to Studio 122. I'm your host, Spencer James Nelson, and today we have with us a documentary maker, Serina Dennis. Serina, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks.
That's
Glad
great.
to be here.
So, with your documentary, what exactly is it about?
Well, right now I'm focusing on, I started out, the idea was just to take a kind of a snapshot of like racism currently in Commerce, Texas, just a snapshot of what it looked like. Right now, when investigating that, I basically started looking just into the past and the history of the school. So it's starting out with desegregation and leading into today.
All right, so with that snapshot of Commerce, what inspired you to do that?
Mostly, honestly, the angry Facebook comments that I see a lot of times from, well, friends, we'll say friends and family and loved ones, that just the stuff that people say that they don't even realize is incredibly racist. And just a lot of the subtle racism that I see people, it's a lot of that, it's just very subtle, they don't even realize it or consciously, and if you talk about it, they deny it, but it's hard to describe and hard. I just wanted to kind of shine a spotlight on that and give a voice to that.
So, in other words, it's subtle or casual racism.
Yeah, which is what we're at now. It's not so much nobody's putting up a sign saying you can't use this water fountain, but there's the subtle, it's just this attitude that I seem to see where a lot of people think, okay, certain people are less than other people, and it's very subtle, and I don't know how to fix it other than to shine light on it. And it is, as a white woman, there's limits to how I can show other people's perspective. So it's always going to be from my perspective. But.
So in that case, what are some issues that, basically, do you see these casual racism issues on campus at all?
I see a lot in the, not like in the close group of people that I know, like theater people are some of the most open-minded people that I've met, but in life, everyday life, I do see that with especially older people that just, they just don't realize they're part of this system that's been, it's something that started like looking back on like the history of our school. We were one of the last schools to desegregate, second to last in Texas, and it was about 10 years after the Brown versus the Board of Education. And it was just it's just a very different attitude. For example, I've discovered in my research that Juan Carlos, one of the Olympic athletes from the 1968 Olympics that made history because he and his teammate did the Black Power symbol on the stand. He actually went to school here for a year before that. And there's a chapter in his autobiography entitled The Trouble in Texas. So coming from Brooklyn, New York, or no, it may not have been Brooklyn, coming from New York, it was a very different world coming to the South. And it is just a different world, and there's still remnants of that.
All right. And then, do you see any sort of change that has happened throughout the past couple of years? I know that obviously we're not doing lynch mobs or like complete segregation or anything, but do you see any larger differences with nowadays?
Like improvement or?
Improvement, I guess, yes.
I don't know that, it's hard for me to answer that from my perspective because it's not something I live every day. I know when I did an interview with several members of the Black Student Association, newly formed here, the one thing they talked about a lot of times would be like they were going out on professional job interviews, like one of them was a teaching intern, and the dress code there like specifically said, no dreadlocks, no that, like it was very just in a way, or just wearing your hair as it is, like, it'd be like if someone said, no, Serena, you can't wear straight hair. Like, you have to curl it or do something with it. Like, it would just be ridiculous. And there's things like that is just almost looked down on in some circles. They had talked about going to a conference to learn, okay, here's how we exist in this world. And just things like that, like don't wear your hair like this, wear it a certain way. And just stuff like that where you think, okay, maybe it's just inconvenient, but it really is almost dehumanizing to say, no, the way your hair comes out of your head, you have to change that. Like,
All right. For those of you who just are now joining us, we are here with a documentary filmmaker, Serina Dennis. Serina is a graduate student at Texas A&M University Commerce, and we're more than happy to have her here. Okay, so with your documentary, are there any important figures that are featured?
Well, the main one is Juan Carlos, and there's tons of documentary footage of him. Additionally, Opal Pannell was one of the leaders in commerce back in the days of when things were segregated. If you were black, you had to live in what they now call the Norris community, and she's one of the leaders in that community that worked to get grants to get, they had, when the regular town had electricity, they didn't have basic things like electricity, their own fire department, and these basic things that we take for granted. And she was one of the leaders in getting equal services to that part of town.
Right. And then also another, just relating off important figures, as you know, being a student here on campus, the Hall of Languages was renamed to Talbot Hall, and we just talked about it in our last segment, actually.
Yeah, I saw the end of that.
So with that, with Dr. Talbot, he was the first African-American faculty member here after we desegregated in 1968. Now, how does this at all relate to the themes in your documentary at all?
Yeah, it's a huge part of actually, that is one of the progress that I think we've seen. And one thing I thought while I was at that ceremony, I thought, it's amazing that here we name buildings after people that are important and have a lot of character rather than just people that donated a lot of money. So that's an aside, just something I appreciate about Texas A&M University Commerce. Yeah, there's that. I mean, that to me is definitely a sign of progress. There's also, people have this, I don't know if this is something that will happen, but something that the Black Student Association is currently looking into doing is changing the name of Gee Library, because I guess it's Dr. Gee. He was very much against segregation.
Really?
Or desegregation, yeah. Was very much, it was only after he retired that they were able to do that.
All right. And then can you go more in depth into that, like over, I guess, what their idea over renaming the library would be?
Just an idea, because his name is here, and it, I mean, to walk through, one of the students in an interview said, you know, when I walk through there every day to get my books, and I mean, just seeing the name of someone who did not want me here, it can be, I think, demoralizing and very, because a name on a building is someone you want to honor. Well, I know he did a lot to contribute to building the library, and I know that it'll be controversial. So there's, it's a big step to rename a building, but that's one aspect of it. Is that someone who just, I can't imagine just if someone said, we don't want people with blonde hair at the school, and their name was on a building. Like, it would be discouraging, I think, to see every day.
All right. And then with your documentary, how did you gather your cast and crew?
Well, my crew, I actually just got a few undergrads from practicum class here in the RTV department. Yeah, cast is mostly just, I'm using a lot of just interviews, and then a lot of archival footage, which you, as part of my crew, he's part of the crew, and two other people. Yeah, okay, Allie James and Joe Miller, who's in the control booth there. I'm totally breaking the fourth wall of television. But yeah, it's a lot of, you guys spend a lot of hours going through documentary footage or archival footage and finding stuff, but because Professor Shannon Carter did a lot of research in this area about 5 years ago. So.
All right. Well, thank you again for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching Studio 122. I'm your host, Spencer James Nelson.